بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وبعد. Beloved brothers and sisters, honorable ulama, huffaz, hujjaj, mothers and fathers, our viewers and listeners, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. كيف حالكم؟ Alhamdulillah. My beloved brothers and sisters, Alhamdulillah, this evening I'm closing the series on reflecting on important moments or salient moments in the life of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And in this limited time this evening, I just wanted to reflect on some of the last words of advice that our beloved Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam gave us. Some of the last words of advice. You know, when someone in our family passes away, right? We often hold on to, what did they say to us in the last moments? What was the last WhatsApp message they sent us? Because often, and I think the nature of human beings is that we attribute increased sentimental value to that last message. If someone had left us and we reflect, the last time I saw that person in the masjid, this is what they said to me. And there's this special attachment to those final words that a person shares before they leave this world. And so we are reflecting on very special words of the most special and important human being to have ever walked this earth, Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So last week we spoke about Medina. And alhamdulillah, if you recall, when we reflected on Makkah, we see that when we described the Makkah period in Seerah, Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam faced a lot of difficulties, trials, challenges. And Medina was the opposite. Medina was the triumph and victory and the success of the Muslim Ummah and the success of the mission of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So from a few hundred, the ummah and the community grew into tens of thousands. And during the period of Medina, the Muslims succeeded in their growth. The Muslims won multiple battles. The Battle of Badr, the Battle of Uhud, the Battle of Khandaq, and many other military expeditions were successful. And then we come to the 10th year after Hijrah. And this year is very important. 10 years that Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had been in Medina. And it is the season of Hajj. And Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam performs his only Hajj in the 10th year after Hijrah. And he delivered what we refer to as the Khutbatul Wida, the farewell sermon. And previously, it used to be the culture in many of our homes in the city. You would see the Khutbatul Wida. It used to be beautifully up in the homes. I haven't seen it recently. Must maybe return, inshallah. It used to be beautifully in the homes, and it reminded people what was the farewell sermon khutbah of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in that khutbah, I just want to pull out one point because of time. And he delivered this khutbah in the state of Ihram on the greatest day, Yawm Arafah, the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. On the plains of Arafah, he delivered his farewell khutbah. We refer to it as the farewell khutbah, but of course at that stage no one knew it was the farewell khutbah. But he gave the ummah an indication that his days are limited. Because at the beginning of his khutbah, he said, Ayyuhan nas, O people, Isma'u minni ubayyin lakum. Listen carefully to me. Lend me an ear. I will clarify matters for you. فَإِنِّي لَا أَدْرِي لَعَلِّي لَا أَلْقَاكُمْ بَعْدَ عَامِ هَذَا. For verily I don't know, perhaps I will not meet you after this current year. And those words shocked the tens of thousands of Sahaba who were on Arafah. And when he delivered this speech, there were no mic systems, no technology that we have today. And it was called out loudly by Sahaba so that others could hear what he was saying. And if you go to the harams, you pick up that tradition of like a mukabbir, someone who repeats the takbir for others to hear. And Nabi Muhammad ﷺ continued and he said, one of the words that I want to touch on, he highlighted وَإِنَّكُمْ سَتَلْقَوْنَ رَبَّكُمْ فَيُسْأَلَكُمْ عَنْ أَعْمَالِكُمْ. On Arafah, he told the Ummah, I'm reminding you that you are going to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you are going to be asked about all the deeds you engaged in. And then Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned a really amazing point. He said, Amma ba'ad, ayyuhan nas, said, O people, الشيطان قد يئس أن يعبد بأرضكم هذه أبدا ولكنه إن يطمع فيما سوى ذلك فقد رضي بما تحقرون من أعمالكم فاحذروه على دينكم. Listen to these words of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his farewell khutbah to all of us. He said, beware of shaitan. And beware and look after your deen. And then he said to all of us, including you and I in this masjid this evening, that shaitan has lost hope in taking you out of Islam. But shaitan will lead you astray in the smaller matters. And this is very important words, my dear brother and sister. Because as we are in this masjid and as you are listening online, well, alhamdulillah, we take for granted iman, belief. And Nabi Muhammad ﷺ said that shaitan will not succeed perhaps in removing you from Islam. Your Islam will be there, but the smaller matters will mislead you. And we look at an ummah today, a community today, a family today, a marriage today, the smallest matters remove our Islam, affect our Islam, because shaitan had come in. And then he delivered this very beautiful khutbah. Inshallah, we will discuss the khutbah in detail in the future. But Nabi Muhammad ﷺ delivered this in the 10th year after Hijrah, on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. And of course, revelation concluded then as well. The revelation of the Quran concluded. Thereafter, after the Quran had been now revealed, and he had conveyed the message to the Ummah, his time concluded. For after that Hajj, he started showing symptoms of sickness. And he told his beloved Aisha radiallahu anha, his wife, that I think the poison that I consumed with Khaybar is starting to take effect in me. And she knew that this is a sign that his life is coming to an end. And he mentioned to Aisha radiallahu anha in a moment when he was quite healthy, prior to that, and he said to her that before Allah removes a Nabi, the angels show that prophet what has been given and reserved for them in Jannah. And then the angels request the permission of the Nabi to take their ruh. And so Aisha radiallahu anha narrates to us that the Prophet ﷺ became sick. And eventually, as his sickness intensified, he requested that he wants to be in the house of Aisha radiallahu anha. And the other wives consented. And he wasn't sick for very long. And when he was in the chamber of Aisha, and he was on her lap, his head was rested on her lap. And Aisha radiallahu anha describes that in his final moments, he was quite sick. His fever, his temperature was very high. And we know that when your fever is very high, your temperature, you go in and out of consciousness. And she describes that the Prophet ﷺ was moving between being awake and asleep. And then she said that he'd sometimes lay and just look up at the ceiling of the house. And then in the final moments, and many historians highlight that his final day was the 12th of Rabiul Awwal. His last day was the 12th of Rabiul Awwal. That's most narrations. And in his final moments, he shared various words of advice. Now I just want to touch on two. He said in one word of advice, because he couldn't speak much. He was very sick. In one moment, he said to her, As-salah, as-salah. That this ummah must pay attention to this salah. Don't neglect your salah. This was gifted to us. And then Aisha radiallahu anha mentions that she could see the final moment approaching. And he looked up at the ceiling and he went quiet. And then he said, and according to Aisha radiallahu anha, as we find in Sahih al-Bukhari and Muslim, his final words as he closed his eyes was Allahumma ar-rafiq al-a'la. He said, "O Allah, let me be with your higher companions." Then he closed his eyes. And Aisha radiallahu anha says in that moment, she understood what he had told her months earlier. That a Nabi is shown the outcome. And she said, when he made that dua, she knew that he chose the akhirah over the dunya. That he wants to be united with the higher companions. And then he left this world. So my beloved brothers and sisters, as a Muslim, it is our duty to learn as much as we can about our beloved Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as we learn, we must implement. And a very important word of advice, and I'm going to echo some of the sentiments of respected Qari of his Jumu'ah, that we lose our way in the smaller matters. This legacy of Islam, the life of Nabi Muhammad ﷺ was given to us, and we worry over the minor matters. We disassociate. And we all, as we are seated here, I am Muslim, but the values of Islam cannot be seen in many. So we make dua that Allah protects us from shaitan, and that Allah permits that every single one of us lives Islam like our beloved Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And on that I close the Seerah series. May Allah accept it from us, from all the ulama who have participated at the masjid in our Seerah program. Inshallah we start with our new series again next week. Wa sallallahu wa sallam alayhi wa alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Shukran.